Okay, so picture this, it's me, David. Just your average guy, living in a pretty normal apartment complex on the outskirts of Denver. 1 minute, I'm watching the news, same old stuff, then suddenly the feed cuts out, replaced by this grainy, static-filled mess. I figured it was just a local broadcast issue, but then I heard it. Screaming. Not just normal, panicked screaming, but this raw, guttural kind of noise. I peeked out my window, and that's when the bottom dropped out of my world. Down in the courtyard, it was chaos. People weren't just running, they were being torn apart. I saw Mrs. Gable, the sweet old lady from 3B, with her teeth sunk deep into Mr. Henderson's arm. He was screaming, thrashing, but she just kept biting, this crazed look in her eyes. Then he started changing. His skin went pale, his eyes glazed over, and then he lurched towards another screaming resident. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in real time. The sheer, brutal speed of it all, the casual violence, it just broke something inside me. My first thought wasn't even survival, it was a numb disbelief. This couldn't be happening. I slammed the curtains shut, my hands shaking so bad I could barely lock the deadbolt. But the sounds didn't stop. Banging on doors, more screams, that awful, wet tearing sound. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too loud. I knew I had to move. Staying put was a death sentence. Grabbing a backpack, I just shoved in whatever I could, a half-eaten bag of chips, a bottle of water, a rusty tire iron I found in the closet. Every shadow felt alive, every creak of the building was a monster trying to get in. On the stairwell, I saw a woman I'd nodded to 100 times, her face contorted, her jaw hanging unnaturally as she tried to gnaw through the apartment door. I didn't even hesitate, I just ran. Down, 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 past the mangled bodies and the growing horde. The city streets outside were a war zone. Cars crashed, fires blazed, and the moans, gods, the moans were everywhere, a constant, low hum of hunger. I saw a pack of them, a dozen or more, swarming a street vendor, their movements jerky and unnerving, their eyes hollow. They weren't even human anymore. They were just, driven. Driven by this insatiable need. I managed to slip through alleys, avoiding the main roads, the fear a cold knot in my stomach. Every rustle of leaves, every distant shout, sent jolts of pure terror through me. I felt utterly alone, a tiny speck in a world gone mad. You see these things in movies, right? But living it, it's different. The smell of decay, the sheer desperation in everyone's eyes if you even saw another person. Trust. That went out the window with the first scream. Now, you're either prey or a threat. I found myself on the highway, cars abandoned everywhere, some crashed, some just, empty. I kept moving, a desperate scramble for any sign of safety, any chance to just, breathe. But there was no safe place. The horror was absolute, and the silence that followed the initial screams was almost worse, punctuated only by the shuffling of the undead. If you were in my shoes, with nothing but what's on your back and the clothes on your back, and you saw a glimmer of hope, maybe a closed-off building, a chance to rest for a few hours, but you knew there might be someone else inside, and you didn't know if they were friend or foe, what would you do? Would you risk it, or would you keep moving, alone and exhausted? Seriously, I need to know. Look, I don't know how much time I have left, or if anyone will ever even see this. But if you're out there, if you can hear me, please subscribe if you want to know what happens next. Give this a like if you're feeling this. It's all I can think to do right now. Just, keep going. The days bled into weeks. My initial burst of adrenaline had faded, replaced by a gnawing weariness. The meager supplies I'd managed to scavenge were dwindling, and the constant threat of discovery pressed down on me like a physical weight. I'd moved from the initial hiding spot, too exposed, to a network of tunnels I'd stumbled upon, barely wide enough to crawl through. They offered better cover, but the darkness was suffocating, and the stench of damp earth and something vaguely unpleasant was always in the air. I tried to keep a semblance of routine. Wake, check the perimeter, which mostly involved listening for any unusual sounds outside the tunnels, ration a bit of food, and then try to keep moving, exploring deeper, looking for any sign of anything. Anything that wasn't just more dirt and darkness. I found a few more edible roots, bitter but filling, and a trickle of water that I filtered through a scrap of cloth I'd found. It tasted metallic, but it kept me from dying of thirst. The silence was the hardest part. It amplified every rustle, every drip, making them sound like approaching footsteps. I'd started talking to myself, just to hear a voice, to remind myself I was still here. I'd recount the story, the why of it all, over and over. It felt like trying to hold on to a fading memory, a lifeline. But sometimes, in the deepest parts of the tunnels, even my own voice sounded strange, hollow. One afternoon, I heard it. Not a distant sound, but something close. Scrabbling. It wasn't animalistic, it had a rhythm, a deliberate quality. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, pressing myself against the cold, rough wall of the tunnel, straining my ears. The scrabbling got closer, then stopped. A heavy silence followed, punctuated by my own ragged breathing. Then, a faint scratching sound, right above me. Someone was above. I held my breath, not daring to move, convinced this was it. The end of my story. The scratching stopped. A muffled voice. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a human voice. They moved away. I waited for what felt like an eternity, my muscles stiff and burning. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself forward, inching towards the sound. It was a different tunnel opening, one I hadn't explored. Peeking through, I saw him. A man, dressed in worn, practical clothing, carrying a lantern. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the area. He didn't see me. He turned and walked away, disappearing into another passage. My heart rate slowly started to return to normal, but a new feeling, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, began to emerge. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone. It started like a bad flu, a nasty cough that wouldn't quit. Then people started acting off. Really off. Not just grumpy, but wrong. I was on my lunch break, grabbing a hot dog from a street vendor near Times Square, when the first screams went up. It wasn't the usual New York cacophony. This was pure, raw terror. I saw a man, a businessman, he looked like he had his whole life together, suddenly lunge at another guy, not like a mugging, but like he was ravenous. He sunk his teeth into the guy's neck, and the sounds. I still hear them sometimes. I just froze. My hot dog dropped, forgotten. The vendor, bless his soul, tried to pull the attacker off, but then he started to change. His eyes glazed over, his skin turned a sickening gray, and he just lurched. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion, except it was real, and it was happening now. People were running, a stampede of panic, and I was caught in it. I saw a woman, her face contorted in a horrifying snarl, gnawing on someone's arm while their own screams were still audible. It wasn't just a bite, it was a savage ripping, a disregard for anything human. My mind just went blank for a bit. Survival instinct kicked in, I guess. I shoved my way through the chaos, not really thinking, just moving. Every corner I turned, it was the same thing, or worse. A cop, mid-arrest, suddenly turning on his suspect with a primal hunger. A child, no older than 5, looking vacant and then lunging at their own mother. It was a plague of insanity, a descent into pure, unadulterated savagery. I ended up barricaded in a small convenience store, the glass front already shattered. The silence outside was worse than the screams. It was a waiting game. I had a few bottles of water and some stale chips. The air was thick with the coppery smell of, well, you know. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the can opener. Every creak of the building, every distant moan, sent a jolt of pure, cold dread through me. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that nothing would ever be the same. My old life, my job, my friends, it all felt like a distant, impossible dream. The world had ended, and I was still breathing in it, alone. Leo watched it all unfold from his third-floor apartment window overlooking Elm Street. It started subtly, a few confused people stumbling, a weird cough echoing through the otherwise quiet afternoon. Then, it escalated. A woman, her face contorted in a silent scream, lunged at a man across the street. He stumbled back, but she was faster, her limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural speed. Leo flinched as he saw her teeth sink into his arm. The man's cry of pain turned into a guttural growl. Within minutes, he was on his feet, no longer himself, joining the chaotic melee. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at Leo. He slammed the window shut, the glass rattling precariously. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't a fighter, never had been. His life revolved around spreadsheets and quiet evenings with his cat, Mittens. Now, the sounds from the street were a symphony of terror, screams, the sickening crunch of bone, and those awful, incessant groans. Mittens, usually so calm, was a trembling ball of fur under the couch. He backed away from the window, his eyes darting around the small apartment, seeking, what? A weapon? An escape route? His gaze landed on the kitchen. Canned goods. Water. He needed to be practical, not paralyzed. The primal instinct to survive, buried beneath years of comfortable normalcy, began to surface. He grabbed a sturdy kitchen knife, the weight of it feeling alien and heavy in his hand. His stomach churned with a mixture of fear and nausea. He saw a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, usually so prim and proper, staggering down the street, her eyes vacant, a bloody smear on her chin. The image seared itself into his mind, a testament to the horrifying transformation he was witnessing. He knew he couldn't stay here. The building felt like a trap. Every floor above, below, and across from him could now be a potential threat. He thought of his family, miles away, a pang of desperation mixed with a grim certainty that reaching them might be an impossible quest. The thought of their fate, if they had already encountered this horror, was almost unbearable. He had to move, to find a safer place, to figure out what this plague was, how to stop it. But first, he had to get out of this building without becoming another monstrous shadow clawing at the windows. The silence within his apartment was now more terrifying than the sounds outside, filled with the echo of what he'd seen and the looming question of what came next. Okay, so picture this. A regular Tuesday morning in downtown Seattle. I was grabbing my usual ridiculously overpriced coffee from that little place on Pike Street, trying to shake off the sleep. Suddenly, it wasn't just the usual rush hour honking. There was this, screaming. Not just one or two people, but a cacophony of pure terror, like a movie scene gone horribly wrong. I peeked out, and that's when I saw it. A woman, no older than me, was hunched over a man on the sidewalk, her face a bloody mess, just tearing into him. And the man? He wasn't screaming anymore. He was just twitching, his eyes milky white, his mouth stretched in this unnatural, gruesome grin. Then, another guy, who just a minute before was probably complaining about the rain, lurched forward, his movements jerky, stiff, like a broken puppet. He wasn't trying to help. He was trying to bite anyone in his path. My first instinct was disbelief. This couldn't be real, right? A prank? A movie shoot? But then I saw more. People stumbling, their skin a sickly gray, their clothes torn, their eyes vacant, yet filled with this predatory hunger. They were shuffling, but fast enough to catch the ones who were still running, still screaming. It was chaos. Utter, unadulterated chaos. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, the hot liquid splashing onto the already stained pavement, but I didn't even feel it. My mind was just a white noise of panic. I bolted back into the cafe. The barista, a kid named Leo, had this look on his face that I'll never forget, pure, unadulterated terror. He was fumbling with the cash register, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't even open it. Outside, the sounds intensified. Growls, ragged breaths, and more screams, closer now. We could see them through the glass, bumping into each other, clawing at the windows. It was like a tide of death was washing over the city. The primal urge to survive kicked in. Forget the coffee, forget everything. Leo and I, we locked the doors, shoved tables against them, anything to buy us a few minutes. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach, a tremor in my hands. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the building sounded like one of them trying to get in. We were trapped, and the world outside was gone. Replaced by this nightmare. The smell, even through the closed doors, started to seep in. A coppery, decaying stench that made my stomach churn. We were so alone, and the thought of what we'd have to do to survive, to get to survive, was already starting to crush me. The supplies were dwindling fast. The canned goods were mostly gone, just a few dented cans of beans left. Water was rationed, each sip a conscious decision. We'd started hoarding anything that could be used, anything that might keep us alive for another day. The silence was the worst, broken only by the occasional desperate cough or the rustle of someone shifting their weight. We tried barricading the doors more, piling furniture, anything to make it harder for them. But the smell, that foul, sickly sweet odor, it was a constant reminder that they were still out there, probably just waiting. Someone tried to make a break for it a few days ago. We heard the yelling, then the sounds. It wasn't long after that. We all knew what happened. No one spoke of it, but the silence was heavier than before. The hope that had flickered, however weakly, was starting to die. We were stuck, playing a waiting game, and it felt like we were already losing. The leader, the one who'd been trying to keep us organized, he started looking gaunt, his eyes wide with a fear that was becoming infectious. He'd talk about plans, about finding a way out, but his voice lacked conviction. Then, something changed. The smell seemed to intensify, right outside our main entrance. It wasn't just a pervasive scent anymore, it was a presence. We could hear shuffling, guttural noises, a scraping against the metal door. Panic started to set in. People were crying, others were frozen, just staring blankly. I felt that familiar cold knot tighten in my gut, but this time, it was mixed with a strange kind of resignation. We'd done everything we could. The scraping stopped. Then came a tremendous bang, followed by another, and another. The door was groaning, splintering. We huddled together, backs pressed against the far wall, listening to the sounds of our defenses failing. There was a final, deafening crash as the door burst inwards. Silhouettes filled the opening, dark and indistinct against the fading light outside. We didn't even scream. There was no point. The smell, now overpowering, washed over us, and the world, it ended right there. As the barricaded door finally succumbed, a wave of dread, cold and palpable, washed over us. The stench, a putrid testament to the inevitable, filled our sanctuary, eclipsing even the primal fear that had held us captive for so long. In that moment, as those hulking, shambling shapes began to fill the doorway, the last vestiges of hope evaporated. There was no escape, no last stand, just the stark, horrifying realization that our time had run out. The world, as we knew it, ended with that deafening splinter of wood and the guttural moans that followed. Before that final terrifying moment, our small group had carved out a fragile existence within the reinforced confines of what was once a bustling community center. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had meticulously rationed our dwindling supplies, her calm demeanor a bulwark against the rising panic. David, with his surprising knack for engineering, had reinforced every potential entry point, his hands calloused but steady. Young Maya, despite her fear, had become a beacon of quiet resilience, her innocent drawings of a brighter future offering fleeting moments of solace. And then there was old Mr. Henderson, whose tales of past hardships, while often grim, carried an underlying message of enduring strength. Each of us had contributed in our own way, clinging to the belief that intelligence and cooperation could somehow prevail against the overwhelming tide of the encroaching chaos. We had managed to hold out for weeks, a testament to our collective will, but the constant pressure, the relentless assault, had finally worn down our defenses. Looking back, those precious weeks were a blur of heightened senses and constant vigilance. Every creak of the building, every distant cry, sent ripples of anxiety through us. We learned to live on edge, to find comfort in the small victories, a successful foraging mission, a night without incident, the shared warmth of a meager fire. It was a stark reminder of how quickly civilization can unravel, how fragile our modern comforts truly are. The experience etched a deep understanding within me of the importance of preparedness. Having a diversified skill set, knowing how to find clean water, and understanding basic first aid are not just theoretical concepts, they are lifelines. Though our story concluded in that desolate place, the lessons learned endure. If you find yourself in a dire situation, remember to stay calm. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford, it clouds judgment and paralyzes action. Focus on what you can control, even the smallest things. Assess your surroundings, identify potential resources, and make a plan, however rudimentary. Your ability to remain composed, to think rationally amidst the chaos, will be your greatest asset. Thank you for joining us on this journey. It's a stark reminder that the world can change in an instant. Always remember the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. Continue to educate yourselves, build your skills, and support one another. If these stories have resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more insights into resilience and survival. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, your input is invaluable, and together, we can build a stronger, more informed community.